In this bulletin, federal authorities announce an expansion to the COVID-19 vaccination program. However, vaccines won't be mandatory. Victorian health authorities continue to investigate Melbourne's outbreak. And in sport cycling, champion Egan Bernal delays a trip home due to a positive COVID-19 test. You're listening to SBS News. I'm Sofia Petric. State and territory leaders have not agreed to mandate COVID-19 vaccination for aged care workers following Friday's National Cabinet meeting. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said the group was heavily leaning toward the idea, however asked health experts to give more advice. Earlier this week, Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly and a panel of experts suggested against mandating the shot, saying there was concern over unintended consequences, such as people quitting their jobs. However, the program is being expanded with Australians over 40 now having access to coronavirus vaccinations from next week. The expansion of the immunisation program will bring it in line with several states, including Victoria, which have already widened to the over 40s. Pfizer vaccines will be made available to people aged between 40 to 49 from Tuesday, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people aged 16 and above now have access to vaccines, along with National Disability Insurance Scheme recipients and carers. Health authorities in Victoria are still working to determine how a Victorian family contracted the Delta coronavirus variant. Victoria's latest outbreak, for which Melbourne is now in its second week of strict lockdown, rose by 4 cases on Friday, 3 of which are linked to a household in the city's west. No one has yet been hospitalised locally with the Delta variant, which is similar to the Kappa strain that sparked the rest of the current Melbourne outbreak. Both Delta and Kappa refer to strains first detected in India. Australia's Chief Medical Officer Paul Kelly has said there has been some evidence that vaccines may not be as effective against the Delta strain. Trade ministers representing the 21 members of APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Bloc, are meeting to discuss the coronavirus pandemic. The virtual meeting held today will be chaired by New Zealand's Trade and Export Growth Minister Damien O'Connor, who described the pandemic as the greatest health and economic crisis of our lifetimes, saying it required the APEC's cooperative response. APEC member states account for around half of global merchandise trade and include China, Japan and the US, the world's 3 biggest economies. And a 2-day meeting of G7 health ministers in the United Kingdom has also touched on issues relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. The United Kingdom's Health Secretary Matt Hancock praised a decision from the group to implement changes which would speed up the delivery of future medicines.
Well, this has been a really successful G7 summit of health ministers, a whole series of actions to help to tackle this pandemic and also to make sure we're better prepared for the future have been agreed. The one I'd point to is that we're changing the rules on how clinical trials are developed and delivered to make sure we can get drugs to market faster, so we can make sure that people can get medicines, new medicines, faster than they previously would be able to.
The meeting comes ahead of the 47th G7 summit, scheduled for 11th to the 13th of June in the United Kingdom. And Russian President Vladimir Putin opened Friday's main session at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, addressing a number of issues. Key among them was an upcoming meeting with United States President Joe Biden. Mr. Putin said relations between the two countries were at an extremely low level, accusing the US of wanting to withhold Russia's development with its actions and sanctions. He said he hoped tensions would be eased after their June 16 meeting in Geneva, with Mr. Putin flagging that arms control, global conflicts, the coronavirus pandemic and climate change will be among the issues he and Mr. Biden will discuss. And hundreds gathered in Hong Kong overnight to mark 32 years since the deadly crackdown on protesters in China's Tiananmen Square. Candles, flashlights and phones were held in a vigil of remembrance despite a police ban on annual candlelight vigils in Hong Kong.
Last year and this year they forbidden lights here in Victoria Park, but I myself will come here to memorize the death. So I'm here today.
This is the second year in a row police have banned the gathering, citing coronavirus social distancing restrictions. In the past years, tens of hundreds of people have gathered in Victoria Park to honour the dead. Thousands attended last year despite the ban, with police later arresting and charging more than 20 activists. And moving to sport now, recent Giro d'Italia winner and 2019 Tour de France champion Egan Bernal has tested positive for COVID-19. The champion returned a positive test as he prepared to travel home to his native Colombia, just days after his win in Milan. His team has released a statement saying he will self-isolate at his European base according to the necessary guidelines. Bernal is displaying mild symptoms but is in relatively good health. He says he still plans to return to Colombia once his isolation period is over. And taking a look at the weather today, in Perth, mostly sunny, 21 degrees. A shower or two in Adelaide, tops of 18. A late shower or two in Melbourne, 14 degrees. 16 degrees in Hobart and similar conditions. A morning frost in Canberra. Other than that, mostly sunny, tops of 11 degrees. Sydney, mostly sunny today, tops of 18. Cloud clearing in Newcastle, 18 degrees, while Brisbane is sunny, 22. Tops of 27 in Cairns and 31 degrees in Darwin. You're listening to SBS News. I'm Sofia Petrovic.